Functions and graphs, finding the domain of function. The objectives of this lesson, you will be able to find the domain of some simple functions. The objectives of this lesson to find the domain for that equation, for example. First equation it will be y equal x squared. How we can find the domain for this equation? The other example for simple function, the root or square root for any function. So how we can find the domain for that equation, y equals square root of x minus 6. If we have square root, so the square root it will be always, this is rule, x minus 6 is greater than or equal to 0. This is the rule. If we have square root, how we can find the domain? So put the number under the square root, x minus 6, greater than or equal to 0. How we can solve that? X is greater than, move minus x to other side, it will be plus 6. So is x here is greater than or equal to 6, so the domain will be start, because it's greater, start from 6 to infinity. Why we start with the close bracket here and this is open? Because is equal here is greater than or equal, so x it will be closed, and infinity, as you know, infinity and minus infinity always open. The other example for square root, y equal the square root of 4 minus x. As we know from the previous example, if we have square root, the number under square root it will be greater than or equal to 0. Now it will be 4 minus x is greater than or equal to 0. If we move 4 to the other side, it will be minus 4. We need to change the sign if you move it, the number from side to other side. Now we need to divide both sides by minus 1. So if divided or multiplied by minus 1, the greater than change to the less than. So it will be x less than 4. Now, how we can write this by interval? We can do it x less than or equal to 4. It will be start, because less start with minus infinity, and 4 it will be closed because is less than or equal, because we have equal here, so the 4 it will be closed. Now, in that example, we have fractional function. How we can find the domain for fractional function? We need to look at the denominator. Denominator cannot be equal to 0. How we can find that? So if we look at this x plus 3, x plus 3 equals 0 when x equal minus 3. So the domain for that function, it will be r except minus 3. Or we can write it by this way, or this way, or this way. All of this, it will be the domain for fractional function. The other example of fractional function, square root of x over x squared minus 3x plus 2, we need to find the domain for that function. First of all, as we know, the square root of x, it will be greater than 0. So the domain cannot be contain any number make the denominator equal 0. So we need to find the zeros of that function, x squared minus 3x plus 2. We need to find the zeros for that equation. So x, it will be x minus 1 times x minus 2. We factor this function. Then we find x minus 1 it will be x equal 1 and x equal 2. How we can find this? By factor this equation and zero factor probability. So we find x equal 1 and x equal 2. Now we didn't find the domain yet. So what is the domain for that function? We have the domain for that function for all non-negative, because x is greater than equal 0, non-negative real number except 1 and 2. So the domain for that function, we have two rules. First rule about the square root. The square root is greater than or equal to 0. So that makes non-negative, because x is greater than or equal to 0, and the number except 1 and 2, because this is the 0 for denominator. So the domain, it will be all non-negative, and all non-negative numbers except 1 and 2. Thank you for listening.